take where we're at here in April of 2026, and what do we know? Well, I can tell you that in the last 24 to 36 months, so the last 2 to 3 years, there's never been more open vice president, assistant vice president, or director level positions that are going unfilled on college campuses.
Higher education is under unprecedented pressure: financial, cultural, competitive. These forces are pushing universities to act like factories, filling seats, chasing numbers, surviving another year. But exceptional leaders refuse to accept this as the only path forward. They're building community in their own unique ways, creating places where students feel seen, known, and inspired to belong. Their stories can light the way for others navigating this transformation. These are the architects of belonging.
Yeah, Jeremy, we always like to learn more about who our guests are as people, as humans. And with you in particular, we have had the opportunity to speak with you before, but would love to try to dive a little bit deeper into that just to get some context. So one of our first questions that we're going to kick this off with is to just pull back, thinking about maybe when you were growing up, or maybe even thinking about your formative years. What are some of like the major experiences or moments that come to mind that you feel have shaped who you are today?
I would say, one of the moments I probably will never forget in my life happened my junior year of high school. Knew I wanted to go to college. You have to remember, I'm a 90s kid, right? So I graduated from high school in the mid 90s. The internet was slowly becoming a thing. Email didn't exist. Social media didn't exist. And so, while I knew I wanted to go to college, I was like, I don't know what I want to do. And of course, that problem is still a problem for a lot of young people, right, today. But my history teacher at the time, his name, was Ken Boychuk, still alive to this day. And Mr. Boychuk just really did a good job of not just making history class fun, but being willing to have that conversation with me about, hey, like, Jeremy, what do you see as the next step for you after high school? And just where can I help you? And where can I support you? And he did a lot of things that just got me thinking maybe differently about how to approach college and how to kind of go through the process and maybe how to think about like what my life goals were going to be. And the one thing I remember him saying is, Jeremy, like, you're going to change your mind a whole bunch of times and that's okay. Right. And I joke with people now, right? I'm almost 51 and people are like, so Jeremy, where'd you go to college? And I tell them, and they're like, "What'd you get your degree in?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I got a history degree with a minor in English, and I've never had a job my entire career because I have a history degree with a minor in English." Right? Does having a degree help me? Without question. And so, um, but I think, this idea of trying to have it all figured out when we're young is just totally unrealistic for all of us. And so it was nice to have somebody in my formative years say, like, Jeremy, you don't have to have it all figured out. Right. But like, think about things that interest you. Think about, and so I think that was really a good tone setter for me when I went to college. And then I ended up going to a school that was, I grew up in Canada outside Toronto. So I stayed in Canada for university, but I went to a university that was 18 miles, 18 hours away from home in the same province. But there's all these things called the Great Lakes that like you can either fly over or you got to drive around. And so it's a long drive. And so I went to a school called Lakehead University up in Northern Ontario. And quite honestly, I look back, Tim and Lungi, and it was the best experience ever for me in terms of, I think, molding some of the things that have made me the person and leader I am now, which is, I really had to take ownership of a lot of things being that far away, not being able to go home other than just, maybe one time a year at Christmas. And so just having that independence and having to kind of deal with things. I remember my mom to this day saying, Jeremy, we're putting money in your account at the start of each month. We don't care how you spend it, but like, don't ask for more money because we're not putting more money in it until the start of next month. Right. And so you got to make decisions. Cool. Are we going to use that money for like fun activities or are we going to use that money for like food and, and things of that nature? And so,
Hmm.
I just feel like between those conversations I had in high school with my history teacher and then between family conversations, but especially those with my mom, it really got me on the track of saying, okay, like I have to take ownership of these things and it's okay not to have like all the answers, but like I've got to try to control what I can control.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we all are grateful to Mr. Boychuk in our lives that shapes us at the beginning and believes in us. We also saw that you have basketball. How does basketball come into the mix? And yeah, how did that shape you as a person as well? And why is it in the mix?
So, growing up in Canada, as you might imagine, you can't not be around hockey. So, I'm not going to tell you I wasn't a hockey fan. I am still a hockey fan. I am, unfortunately, a Toronto Maple Leafs fan and will be till the day I die. And the Maple Leafs, anybody listening who follows hockey knows it's been a tough go as a Maple Leafs fan since I was a kid. But I really also got into basketball mainly because one of my best friends, still to this day from high school, that I'm still very good friends with, was on the high school basketball team. And I just remember junior year, ironically again, of high school, him saying, Jeremy, you need to come out for the team. And I was a very average, at best, high school basketball player. But again, I felt like I made up for my, deficiencies just through hard work and, really trying to be a student of the game at the time. And so went out for the team. And I remember my high school coach, Mr. Stacy basically saying, Jeremy, you're probably going to be the last guy on the bench and you're probably not going to play like at all, if very much the entire season. But if you're cool with like coming and being part of the team, we'd like you to be part of the team. And for me, that was fine. I love that. And I was just, and then I think, just watching the NCAA tournament growing up as a kid, they're still buried in a box in my basement here in my home now, have, I don't know, 7 to 10 years in a row of the NCAA championship game on actual VHS, for those who are old enough to know what a VHS is, where we used to stick those things in a VCR and press record when there was no DVR, obviously, like we have in our TVs now. And so I think I was just always, enamored by the idea of, man, like team sports and basketball. And, then I got to college, as I shared. And my first summer between my freshman and sophomore year of college, the same best friend to this day and I were just talking. He goes, hey, did you see there's like an opportunity to like coach this like summer league team around here? And I'm like, I did see that. And we just talked and we said, wouldn't that be kind of cool to do together? And so we coached this summer team, which essentially was almost like, what in the US would be called an AAU basketball team. And I will never forget that first game and just going, wait, like, I love basketball. I love the idea of like mentoring and teaching because I thought I was going to be a teacher in college. Mr. Boychuk factors into that, right? Kind of if you tie everything together. But I was like, well, you can't really go to college to be a coach. I'm like, there isn't really a degree to do that. So I didn't want to just stop college and say, well, now what? So I finished out my degree. And then my wife and I, who had been dating at the time, it was kind of like, cool. All right. Well, if you want to pursue basketball, like there's going to be more opportunities in the US to be able to do that. And my wife went to university in the US. And so ultimately in the late 90s, I came to the US. And, at the end of the day, I had opportunities to coach at the high school level and I had other opportunities to, coach at the AAU level and just enjoyed it so much that I said, all right, I want to, move up the ladder and I want to see what it would be like to be a college coach. And so I was blessed to have, opportunities over 8 years to do that at three different universities, two in Minnesota, one here in Indiana where I live. And, I think coaching to this day was one of the things I was most passionate about just because of, kind of tying in with my why, which is I just, the idea to be able to help another human get better at something, I don't know what that does to me, but it like just does something for me that is like so amazingly awesome. And so, I think I've always been a teacher slash coach at heart. And so, when I had those opportunities, Lungi, it was just something where I was like, cool. And along the way, if I'm being honest with you, I think one of the things that motivated with me was this idea of, well, Jeremy, you didn't play college basketball. So like, how the heck are you going to be a college basketball coach? But I knew I had other skills that were important that if I was able to showcase, namely the ability to build relationships with people, that I think I would still have opportunities. And I did. And so, yeah, it just, it was one of those things where it was interesting and I was curious enough about it that I said, let's see what happens. And then the more I did it, the more I enjoyed it and said, okay, well, let's see what the next phase of that could look like. So,
Yeah. Well, what a story there. And yeah, as a Canadian, you are that deep in the basketball world. This is probably a bit of a shock to some people, but
Yeah, it's come a long
yeah.
way. I mean, the Raptors didn't exist when I was a kid, obviously. But I think, if you think about it, right? Like, I know one of the things we're going to talk about today is this idea of, community, right? And I think even,
Yeah.
when I was growing up, right, it hasn't changed. It's just the way we form relationships in community is just, it's different now because of technology, right? But I think, if I
Hmm.
truly look back, guys, and I think, what was it that drew me to things like coaching and what was it that drew me to higher ed when I left coaching? It was this idea of like, okay, there's a community out there that I want to be a part of, whether it's a team of basketball players or a team of admissions and enrollment marketing professionals that I want to play, a small role in that person or that team's growth process.
Yeah. So you when you were talking through that, you did mention about your why. So I wanna go there and spend a little bit of time there. After basketball, you ended up transitioning into the higher ed space. And then if we fast forward that all the way up to 2025, you have gone on to start your own business as well within higher education. Um, which you're starting this also at a time, in an era where there is a lot of pressure going on within higher education. So, can you tell us a little bit about how your why, the helping of humans, is maybe continuing to keep you invested or drive you forward, even to the point of starting your own business within higher ed to help teams, within a moment that is quite challenging?
Yeah, I'll give you another story. Um, One of the things I've done since I started in the higher ed space, is staff training and workshops. Most of which are related to things like, communication and student recruitment and just, those day-to-day skills that whether you're an admissions counselor, an enrollment marketer, you're running campus visits, you're in one of those areas, the things that are obviously going to help you serve students and families more. And so within that, I do one-on-one meetings when I'm on a campus. I was sharing with you guys when we first jumped on today. I was at a school in Minnesota here earlier this week. And, part of the training involved me meeting with, 7 or 8 people while I was there and doing one-on-ones, and the reason I've done those over 12 years is, they allow me to provide another layer of support knowing that each person is different and at a different stage, right, in their career and may have different goals, and so, a number of years ago, I was sitting, in a meeting room on the campus of High Point University, which is a school in North Carolina, and at High Point, one of the unique things they do, still to this day at the beginning of every year, is they give new students as a teddy bear. Right? And the teddy bear is an important lesson on gratitude, which is a pillar, right? Every school's got things that they, you know, believe tie into their mission. And one of the big things at High Point is this concept of gratitude. They believe it's a life skill, and High Point, right, is considered the life skills university, right? And so their president, President Q, as he's known, has some conversations with students at the beginning of their college journey and challenges them to give away the teddy bear to someone who has helped them along the way and, made an impact and just explained to that person, hey, like, here's what you have been able to help me do. And so I was finishing up a one-on-one with a newer team member who I had literally only talked with, right, a total of 2 times for about 30 to 35 minutes. And I'll never forget the look on her face or the words when she said, Jeremy, like, you have helped me get better more than you know. And then she reached down into her purse and she handed me the teddy bear. And if I literally go like this on my screen, you can see the teddy bear literally up there on the top of my shelf. It's still actually there's 2 bears now, but it's the one there on the left by the basketball. And the feeling I had, guys, when that happened, like the ability to impact another human being, I think we all go, well, yeah, you have to know somebody forever and you have to be like, so deep into a relationship to really make an impact. And I'm like, no, you really don't. I'm like, it could be the result of a 10-minute conversation, 2 30-minute conversations, and just the joy and the fulfillment, guys, that I get through that type of interaction. And I'm blessed to say that while I don't have obviously a wall of teddy bears, I have had many, I'll say similar type conversations over 12 years where somebody will say, hey, you challenged me and here's why it's helped me. Or, hey, didn't think this was going to work, Jeremy, but I tried it and holy crap, like it's making this awesome, blah, 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 blah. And I just wanted to share that with you. Like the serotonin, the dopamine, I can't explain obviously all the, specifics, terms, but like that gets released into our brains when stuff like that happens. Like that just does it for me, guys. There aren't too many better feelings in my mind in the world. So
Yeah. Yeah, and we've actually seen a trail of people reacting that same way. We have a quote here from Amy McQuaid from one of the conferences
yep.
saying, "Yeah, Jeremy's message couldn't have been more timely. He's not only helped attendees understand the purpose and importance of finding the why in our work, but also spend time revealing how to do this." So it is your work and you thriving in your own why is helping other people reveal their own why. Too many whys in this talk track, but why is that important? Why is it important? Like why is your why and the work you're doing important in higher education?
Well, it's not just in higher education. It's important, I would argue, just to be clear, I think in any industry, but higher ed specifically, I would tell you, I think as many people listening probably understand, you're asked to do a lot more with less in higher ed, right? Regardless of what your role is and what department you work in. Higher ed, is notorious for doing that. And so I think that obviously creates additional challenges and I'll say additional stress to what a normal position would be. And so I'm like, okay, you're then going to have times where you either hit that wall, right? Or you just, I'll say you fail, you struggle, like you have some type of challenge. And what I try to communicate to people, guys, is that your why is really important in those situations. Like I have a folder on my desktop of, my MacBook that literally is nothing but screenshots of things that people like Amy McQuaid, who you just, read, who was one of the people who organized a conference I spoke at, or text messages I've got, or LinkedIn posts that over the years where people have just said, "Hey, Jeremy, you impacted me, and here's how." That I literally, when I need to, will go and look at just
Mm.
because they tie in with my why, right? So your why, I think when you struggle is very, very essential to being able to pull you back and level you or ground you or re-energize you, whatever the words are. And so I think it's important to define your why for that reason. But then I also think at the end of the day, your why, I think, also helps you with your personal growth process because I have a lot of people who are like, Jeremy, I don't want to know, excuse me, Jeremy, I don't know what I want to do like next in my career. And I'm like, well, why are you doing this? Like, talk to me about why. Like, again, when I left coaching and I had this time in between guys before I started in higher ed, another very good friend of mine today was like, Jeremy, what are you going to do next? And I'm like, I have no idea. Right? And he's
Mm.
like, "Well, talk to me about, like, why you loved coaching so much." And obviously, I walked him through some of the stuff I shared with you all, and he said, "There's so many industries, right, that, like, you can make a similar type of impact that you're telling me you enjoyed." So, I just encourage anybody who doesn't have a clear why to obviously define it, because when you hit the wall in higher ed, and I'm sure many people listening to this have already hit it, it's easier to bounce back. It's easier to recenter yourself and refocus on the things, that you're trying to do and for you to make that impact when your why is clear.
Very well said. Jeremy, we want to spend a little bit of this conversation discussing the reality of the present day. So I think we'll move to that. Before we were recording, you had mentioned that you had a very busy last month where you were on like 6 or 7 different campuses within 30 days. So myself and Lungi, we do feel like you have a unique perspective of seeing how things show up, almost in real time, but at multiple different types of institutions. And as we've talked about, and as everyone kind of talks about, there is a lot of pressure within higher education today. There is this reckoning that is currently happening within higher education today. Could you just share a little bit, talk about like what does that look like from your vantage point? And in particular, maybe how it differs a little bit, because I'm going to make an assumption that you are kind of stepping foot on different types of institutions, campuses.
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. I believe, right, that whether higher ed wants to admit it or not, so whether college and universities want to believe this, right, you are selling right? And experience. And that's not a bad thing, right? Because very few students go to college completely for free, right? Whether you're paying, $1,000 a year, you're paying $25,000 a year, there's an investment there for like 99% of families, right? And so I think colleges have done a poor job over the last, I'll even say 25 years, right? I talked about my experience growing up and how the internet wasn't a thing, right? Like I still remember my sophomore year of college, right? My university saying, we now have this thing called email, and this is how we're going to communicate with you. And so you'd wait in line at the computer lab because nobody had a computer back then, right? They were really expensive. And like you'd go and do that. That was like, what would that be? That would be 1996, basically, right? To when that happened. So that's 30 years ago. And I look and I go, I remember you couldn't, right, have a significant paying job. So I'll say a job that pays six figures without a college degree. And you probably needed a master's degree at the time. And through the development of technology and just a whole bunch of other things, I think it's put into question the value of a higher ed degree, right? More than ever before. And I think what colleges, for the most part, have done a poor job in saying is, okay, well, then if we believe we're a business, which I would argue they all are, how do we adjust the type of experience we're giving based on what our different audiences want and need from us? And I think colleges are like, we know what they want and need. Here's what you want and need. And I think students and families are going, but that's not what we want and that's not what we need. And that doesn't fit in the investment or the budget that we have. And so I know you've talked, I believe, with Allison Turkio, who's a good friend of mine, about this. And she and I, when we talk, because we're good friends, all the time we'll say, you have to be more audience centered in everything you do. And I think colleges are in some of the challenging states that they're in now because they're like, no, we want to do it this way. You should do it this way. And the marketplace wins every time, right? The consumer has options and the consumer, right, is going to be the end decider. So colleges, I truly believe, are going to need to do a better job of adjusting to things like technology, adjusting to changing demographics, adjusting to the types of offerings they offer and the types of experiences they offer based on what, right, their target audience wants and is willing to pay for. I mean, the example I use all the time is Disney, right? Whether you've been to Disney, right? I don't know if either one or both of you you guys been to Disney before? Yeah.
I haven't. It's a bit daunting for me, but
That's all
I've
right. But like,
I fortunately have been. I have.
yeah,
Yes.
right. And like I joke, but yet I'm serious, Tim, right? And I have a wife. I now have a daughter who's 16 and a half, and we took her when she would have been about 10 when we took her. All right. I also happen to have a family member, my sister, who lives in Auckland, New Zealand. All right. We went there for my sister's wedding. Guys, it cost us more to take our daughter to Disney than it did to go to New Zealand for my sister's wedding. But you know what Disney
Well,
doesn't have? Disney doesn't have a problem getting people through the door,
right.
right?
Mm.
Because Disney, right, tries to be audience centered about everything. And so I really think one of the biggest things right now that colleges and universities, from presidents and provosts and boards on down, needs to do is just say, who are we trying to serve? Knowing that we can't serve everybody. I would argue there's not a single college or university in this country that's set up to serve every type of student, right? Traditional, non-traditional backgrounds, socioeconomic statuses. And then how are we going to serve those students in terms of not just like showing them, hey, you can come here and you can be successful, but like, where are those outcomes to be able to back that up? And so colleges are going to need to continue to do a better job of that if they're going to continue to enroll and retain students. And there's
Mm.
challenges. Tim, you asked about, different types of campuses. The biggest thing I continue to see, I will say, is it becomes almost even more challenging on larger campuses because there's more stakeholders, right? So like on larger campuses, you now have more offices who want to say, more offices who think they know the answer to this, or you should be doing this, or the admissions office just needs to send one more email or do whatever it is. And so your communication has to be even stronger, I would argue, when you work on a larger campus because there are more, I'll say, stakeholders versus on a smaller campus. To be clear, you still have to have great communication, but you tend to, I'll say, have less of a large group that needs to be influenced, for example, to change policies or to change processes or to integrate new systems, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you talk of the audience and market almost demanding and shifting for something, an experience that is different. What worries you most about this reckoning as you take a look at how the higher ed industry is either responding or just perceiving the reality of the present day?
Well, for me, and there's a whole bunch of things I could answer, but I think the obvious one, given the work I do, guys, is the idea of staff retention, right? And so let me break that down. The data is still out there that the average, admissions professional is, in their position less than 3 years. Okay, so we're constantly having turnover there. Then I would argue, take where we're at here in April of 2026, and what do we know? Well, I can tell you that in the last 24 to 36 months, so the last 2 to 3 years, there's never been more open vice president, assistant vice president, or director level positions that are going unfilled on college campuses, right? Because of some of the challenges we've been talking about. Then I also look and I go, there's an office called the financial aid office that every campus has that's really, really, really important, right? Most of the people who work in that office on most campuses have been there for years, and they're about to, I'll say, take the next step in their journey, which is probably retire or move on. And there is no junior level financial aid team, to my knowledge, on any college campus, right? So if I tie all of that together, I look and I go, all right, retention and turnover are going to continue to be things that need to be prioritized. And so just like student retention is a big challenge on a lot of campuses, I would so is staff retention. And then there's layers to that, right? Like if we're not going to develop the leaders who we're going to task to, I'll say, onboard and help new staff grow, then we're obviously going to have challenges retaining those new staff and retaining those leaders. If we're going to ask as an industry, I'll say not just leaders, but a lot of different people to do what I would argue are multiple full-time jobs, right? We're going to have an issue, especially when unfortunately higher ed also doesn't monetarily, right, pay them anywhere close to what higher ed is asking them to do. And so I truly believe the schools that continue to, I'll say, have a ton of staff turnover and have a ton of leadership turnover beyond that, you're going to see a correlation in terms of whether those schools are successful in recruiting and retaining students, right? And I haven't gotten to all the other departments on campus, faculty and coaches and other departments. Those are important too, to be clear. But what I see a lot is a lack of, processes and systems to effectively onboard people. We talked, before we started recording about leadership development, which I'm passionate about. Very few schools invest in things like leadership development for their senior leaders or even their middle managers, right? And so it's not that those staff can't, I'll say, take initiative and learn things on their own. But again, where are they finding the time to be able to do that, right? And so I just think that the staff retention crisis that higher ed is in, which ties in obviously also with the culture that is either being built or not being built in a lot of different offices and campuses, is going to be something that the schools who prioritize it are probably going to be the schools who have less enrollment and retention challenges, and the ones who don't are going to continue to struggle.
That's interesting. We talk a lot about what we call this factory model, which is one kind of reaction that we see to the reckoning. But a lot of times when we talk about it or when we are in conversations with other people, it is looking at it from the lens of how universities end up sometimes looking at students as numbers. But what you are, I guess, kind of bringing to light is that culture also is a bit pervasive through also the administrative or staff or leadership, however, whatever term you want to say, but the non-student side, it's affecting maybe the culture of
the folks that are also running institutions. Where do you think that culture derives from? Do you feel like it has any correlation to the pressures or the reckoning happening in higher education, or do you feel like it's actually an independent behavior that just kind of shows itself within higher education?
No, I mean, again, if we step back and we break down the entire process of a student going through their college search, like I have data from 12 years. You can find other studies to back this up with similar data, right? I do a ton of surveys, did with my previous, company that I worked for. I do with my own company now with students once they've gone through their college search or while they're going through their college search. And two of the top reasons, guys, still to this day, 12 years running, hasn't changed in terms of most important factors when it came time to make a decision. Number one is the feel of campus with the word feel in air quotes. That's exactly how students see it on surveys. And then another factor that always finishes in the top five, right? And there's 15 to 20 different factors to be clear that I typically ask about is how the admission staff treated me throughout this process. Now, I think you could say how anybody from a school treated me, but the admission staff usually is the primary communicator, right, in this process. My point in both of those things is people influence other people. That's how the world works. We make decisions because of what other people think, right? That's just how we work as humans, right? We're all emotional human beings. And so I take a step back and I go, okay, how do you expect staff in any department on a college campus? Like imagine if Disney didn't train their staff. Well, how the heck is Disney gonna then give an awesome experience? Well, it's probably gonna be a lot more inconsistent than what it is now, right? It's the same thing on college campuses. If we're not consistently providing a good employee experience, how the heck are they supposed to deliver a good experience to prospective students and families? And then when those families get there, it's the same problem. It's just at a different stage, if that makes sense, in the, whole ecosystem. And so I truly believe it's stepping back and going, the reckonings happen just because this is how we are as humans, meaning like, okay, our preferences and the things we value and all of that, like we've already talked about, they continue to evolve because that's the way the world works as technology and other things happen. Great. Well, then that means they influence our decision making maybe a little bit differently. But yet at the same time, much like I told you, hey, my high school history teacher was influential in helping me on my college path. Well, there are still other people who absolutely do that, including, right, family, friends, high school teachers, counselors, coaches, whoever it is. But at the end of the day, right, there are people on college campuses who can play an influential role, I would argue, when they have the right training to be able to help, influence on surveys. I mean, I have a comment box on surveys that I do, right? And these surveys, to be clear, are completely anonymous. There's no motivation for any student to say anything nice about anybody. We don't incentivize the survey or anything. And the question basically goes as follows, you ended up choosing X school. We will list the name of the school. What do you remember about like your conversations and communications with like the admission staff? Like who do you remember? No details too small. The amount of times that people will literally say, all right, Tim, let's think you were an admissions counselor, right? Tim Brandt was amazing. And I remember he did, and they will say the most random things that they just remember and how that influenced them in a positive way on their journey. Like, I want more of that because I know, right, that ultimately is a win for the student and family, a win for that admissions counselor, which would be Tim in that, and a win for the school. And so that doesn't happen if, for example, we're not providing the tools, right, that different people need to be able to help guide students and families in their process.
Yeah. So that's super important to share. And let's transition then to the work that is being done. We've talked a bit about like the factory model. You've talked about kind of how that relates to the culture that you see happening, some of the staff retention, the connective tissue or lack thereof between administration staff and how they're engaging with students. Talk about, I'll say at high level, like the transformation that you would like to see within higher education, and maybe how the work you're doing now, especially with your own work that you started up over the last year, how you're thinking about carrying out that transformation. Like what is the work that you feel really needs to be done, and how do you see yourself getting to achieve it?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. Recruitment and retention are everyone's job. That's the way I like to explain it when I do trainings, right? Now, do certain offices have more ownership of things in the process? Absolutely. But if it's everyone's job, and if we're going to create a more, I'll say, welcoming, positive culture and strong communities on these campuses, we have to better understand each other's worlds if we work on a college campus. And I continue to see, Tim and Lungi, that like everybody thinks they know what these other offices do on campus. Yeah, they don't. Just like those offices don't really know the true things that like the admissions or marketing team might do each day. And so the answer is we have to spend more time with each other, right? Like I love being able to have conversations with both of you or with anybody about all this stuff, right? Because I learn things from you and hopefully you learn things from me. Well, that has to happen more on college campuses. I don't believe we're prioritizing that enough. You have the focus groups you need on different campuses. The number one focus group for every single office when it comes to recruiting new students is the current students who are on those college campuses. You have access to them if you work at a college. You can go sit at the Starbucks on campus, the Chick-fil-A, whatever it is, the library, and just like say, all right, Lungi, you're in your first year here. Like, talk to me. How was the transition for you? And what were some of the things that were hard? And explain to Lungi, hey, the reason I'm asking that is because I know I'm going to have this conversation with students who are looking at our school and I just want to be able to give them a better sense of like what students like you are seeing. That's not happening enough on all these campuses. We have too many, say, senior level stakeholders who are saying kind of what I said earlier. We know what students want. We know how to market to them. And I'm like, but did you ask them? Right? Because I'm not saying you're wrong, but like you probably want to double check, right? Especially as technology evolves and all this other stuff we've talked about. And so I think I would like to see more colleges and universities say, how do we bring different parts of campus together? How do we do more cross trainings? How do we have more, I'll say, listening type sessions where we just sit and people don't just talk about like I'll say stats and numbers, and here's the new like offering in the English department. But like we talk about, hey, what do you enjoy a lot about being like a professor of English? And like, what are just so that we can better understand each other's worlds, because then it's easier to communicate that information to, I would argue, prospective students and families who want those stories anyways. So that has to be prioritized. My friend DJ Menifee, who is, one of my very good friends, used to be on the higher ed side, is now on the college partner side at a company called Market View. He used to talk about doing listening tours when he was, on the college side. I'm like, yeah, we need more of that. We need more people to say, I want to go on a listening tour. And each week I'm just going to talk to one person on campus or 5 people or however much time I have. It could be students. It could be a person in this office. Like, it doesn't matter who it is. So college and universities need to evolve there. And then I think they need to also say, if we're going to, for example, talk with more of our students to try to, I'll say, adjust our strategies or confirm ideas and notions we have, then let's listen to what they have to say and not overthink it and not debate it so much where we go, no, we don't want to do that. And we just kind of keep doing what we're doing, right? If we're going to empower them to share, let's listen to them and let's take what we learn and try to implement it and see how it happens. And so I think schools that have strong communities are doing those things. All right. People understand each other's worlds better. Students feel not just like a student and a number lungi, like you said, they feel like my opinion is valued. I get asked questions by different like senior leaders on this campus about my experience and what do I want to see changed and how do I like the food and what do I think about this, like whatever it is. And so that happens rarely on a lot of campuses, just sporadically here and there. It needs to be more of a priority. So I hope that a lot of schools will not only invest time there, but invest time earlier, like I said, when it comes to training their staff and continuing to give their staff, I'll say, mentorship as they go on their growth journey, no matter what department they work in.
Yeah. We 100% agree and actually just learned something there as well. So we for someone who's listening and who says that makes sense, it connects to my heart, and that's how we should show up in our universities. But I don't know when we'll do that. We'll think about it later. What is that risk of not acting on this and of not taking this into account or of not transforming to what you just explained? What is that risk that people might not be understanding?
Well, you limit your growth process and you limit your level of impact for you, the human, in my opinion, there, Lungi, which is if you I'm well aware if you're listening to this and you go, but I'm not a senior leader, so I don't have as much ownership or say of this, fine. But what's stopping you from still going and having some of that dialogue? Like, I end a lot of my training workshops with 3 questions for people, right? I'll say, all right, you've got all this information, some of which validated what you're doing already, some of which is new, and I'm sure has, all the wheels moving, light bulb moments. I'm like, what are you going to do next? Right. And so I'm like, what's one thing you want to start doing? What's one thing you want to stop doing? But then here's the third thing that I ask that ties into what we're talking about. Who do you need to spend more time with on your campus? Right? Like who, if you understand their world better, would help you, all right, effectively do your role better, which probably then translates to you again serving students and families better. And so I would say that if you're an individual who may not have as much ownership of things or like a leadership title, you can still do those things and you can still share what you learn, right, with other people when the opportunity presents itself. And so just control what you can control. But if you're a senior leader on this campus and you do have a little bit more say, again, I encourage you to think if we're not doing these things or we're not doing them consistently, can we start? Should we start? And to your question, Lungi, if we don't start, I would argue, well, then it just becomes harder to number one, retain our staff, to number two, recruit more students successfully, and then number three, be able to retain those students when they actually choose our campus community. And so the answer is, right, it makes everybody's job harder, which then, like I said, causes colleges and universities to unfortunately be in some of the, I'll say, financial and enrollment challenges that we're facing in 2026.
I feel like what you've been talking about here, to kind of try to relate it a little bit to what myself and Lungi talk about is this community model. You are talking about focusing on the student, you know, actually hearing about what is on their mind, making them feel like they matter, and kind of creating that tissue between them. You have been able to carry out this work and this effort that you've been doing. Curious to hear maybe just a success story or two, or some of like what's actually happened with schools that have been able to learn from some of what you've been sharing here.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say in terms of what's happened for schools, when schools prioritize the things that we have talked about today, right? Doesn't mean they do them perfectly every day, but they do them more consistently than what they're doing now, times however many people, right, are involved in this process. I have yet to have a single school tell me, and Jeremy, like, it doesn't positively impact us in some shape or form. So, where are the areas it probably positively impacts most? I would argue it helps with staff retention, right? Like, one of the hills I'll die on in higher ed is no leader, aka somebody whose responsibility is to be a direct supervisor for one or more people, should ever have a territory in higher ed. Not because they're not capable, because I truly believe leadership is a full-time job. And if you're truly going to mentor and help people in their growth journey and help them improve skill sets, like that takes a lot of time to be able to sit, like you just said, with students and do the same thing with your staff and better understand how they feel about things and where they're struggling and all of that, right? And so the schools that are able to do what we've talked about continue to see more students feel like you're making this process more about me, which means it feels more personal, and personalization continues to be something they want. The conversations feel way more genuine and authentic. And authenticity, right, has been a buzzword, I feel like, in higher ed for I don't know how many years, right? And at the end of the day, they feel a part of a larger community and they start to better understand, all right, what does my path look like then if I come to that school? Who are some of the people that can help me on my journey, right, to ultimately achieve some of these goals? And if I don't know what my goals are, who are some of the people at your campus that can help me start to plan and develop those goals, right? So the schools that do these things and prioritize training and listen to their students and incorporate feedback, they're usually, right, having more successful enrollment years. They're retaining their staff longer and they're ultimately right. When I'll say other campus stakeholders also understand all of these things, right? Doing a better job of retaining students once they get there. For me, one of the things I love doing most is I love doing, I'll just say, professional development in a way knowing that budgets are so tight on so many campuses that like people are like, I don't have money for this. I wish I did. I don't. And so I have said, all right, I'm going to create community and I'm going to help people through things like my newsletter. Like probably the thing I'm most proud of that I have been able to do for 12 years is I have a newsletter that has gone out every single Tuesday. Doesn't matter if Tuesday was Christmas, New Year's. I've never missed a Tuesday in 12 years now. I believe this Tuesday I was 601, I believe. So I think next week will be my 600 and in the newsletter, you won't find a single thing about anything my company does. Not because I don't want to work with people, but because I'm like, that's not why they come and read my newsletter. They come and read my newsletter to get quick tips, things that get them thinking, things that they can implement right away. So I give them news articles that would be helpful. I give them a quick 2 or 3 minute read on something I'm seeing or hearing. I give them a leadership tip because I know a lot of them are either in leadership roles or they want to be in leadership roles, right? But I also try to give them a lens into my world. So at the top, I'll have a paragraph or two just saying, kind of, here are some of the things I've seen and heard over the last week, right? And I do fun giveaways and I'm a part of, a group now called, the Crossroads Crew. And we do this little fun thing called First Fridays. And it's 5 of us who are good friends here in Indiana and are leaders. Like there's a whole bunch of things that I'm doing because I want to build a stronger community within higher ed because I truly believe, right? Like at the end of the day, that impact. And so, and then the other thing I'm probably super proud of, and you can see it over my shoulder here, I just pointed at it. If you can see the picture in the background, the NACAC National Conference, which is the big admissions conference every year that happens and moves around the country. A couple of years ago, DJ Menifee, who I mentioned earlier, and then a woman by the name of Megan Tyler, who works at Wofford down in South Carolina. The three of us started meeting for a dinner to talk about leadership. And we had such an enjoyable time that I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to expand this. We need to get more leaders, involved in this. And I'm going to take care of it every year. Just show up, all right, and be prepared to talk about leadership and enjoy a good meal and enjoy some wine. And so now that group was up to 11 people last year. I'm going to expand it even more this year. And it's just people who, again, believe a lot of the things that the three of us have talked about today and want to make that same level of impact and want to learn from others who are making that level of impact. And so the access to be able to have that dialogue with each other. So finding ways to do things like that are ways that I am trying, to continue to create community within the space. And I am finding that people are, number one, blown away that I'm willing to do those things and not expect like, and oh, by the way, like you need to like pay Jeremy this or do this. People are always like, so Jeremy, really, how much does it cost you to actually like email you? And I'm like, nothing, your time. And I think people are just surprised because the assumption is, no, you're going to charge me. And I'm like, no, nobody's abused it to the point where I like, and if that ever happens, like fine, but like nobody's ever abused it in 12 years. And so if I can continue to help people, who want to be helped, but may not, I'll say, because of the situation they're in, have the ability to, monetarily say, yeah, this is something normally you'd pay for. Those are just some of the things that I will continue to do because of how passionate I am about, not only higher ed, but just how many amazing humans there are who are passionate like me and who want to be able to continue to grow and help students and families grow in their process and achieve their goals.
Definitely, definitely aligns with us in building community and as a response to everything that is happening in higher education. So deep respect for that. I think what we'll do is we'll do some 3 quick fire questions for you to wrap up. First one is around your legacy. When you reflect on your legacy, what is the legacy you want to leave behind in higher education?
Well, I hope people, if they talk about me, will say, man, like Jeremy always made it about me, right? Like Jeremy never made it about him. He always was curious and wanted to learn about me and how I was doing and like where he could support me, whether it was, through feedback I shared, through somebody I connected them with, through a fun event that I did at a conference. Like, I hope people look and go, man, like Jeremy invested in me, right? Like, again, tying back into my why, and I know I'm pointing at all these things, like everything that's behind me, like, is there very intentionally because it's important to me. And so there's a quote on the wall there, that says, invest in great relationships, they will pay a lifetime of dividends, right? And that's
Yeah.
by a guy named Bill Walsh, who used to be a football coach for the San Francisco 49ers. And I'm not a 49ers fan, to be clear. I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan. But like, that always stuck with me because it ties in with my why. And so I hope my legacy will be, boy, Jeremy invested in those relationships. And I always felt like he made it about me. And boy, he really loved his work. He was passionate and he put a lot of energy into it.
Awesome. And thanks for reading that because I couldn't read it from so thank you. All right, second question here. If the entire higher education industry stopped right now and went quiet and listened to you, what would you say in a statement?
Wow, that's a very good question. We have to do a better job of supporting each other. And by that, I mean, we have to understand that too often we isolate ourselves in higher ed because we get so busy with the work that I don't know a single human who is able to have growth and be successful personally and professionally without the support of others. And so I think we have to do a better job, regardless of what office we're in, regardless of what level we're at, of supporting each other. And that includes current students, that includes alumni, that includes all the different offices on campus. Like, we just have to do a better job of spending time and supporting each other.
Yep, love that. And then the last one, just as Alison mentioned, who are other leaders that you admire in higher education that are doing great work, that we will probably think about bringing onto the series as well.
So I would give you two names and I could give you 202. But the first, because there's just so many people who have been influential. But when it comes to people who I think really, from a community building standpoint, continue to do an unbelievable job. The first two who came to mind were Kevin O'Sullivan, who is the Senior Vice President of Enrollment Management at Iona University. Kevin's a good friend of mine, and I've done work with him, you know, over the years. But he's just, again, if you said, Jeremy, name the 10 nicest humans in the world, Kevin's on that list. Right. And the other person who I'm about to name is also on that list. And his name is Bart Kaler. And Bart is the president of Kaler Solutions. He also happens to be, a part of that Crossroads crew that I mentioned, the five of us here who live in Indiana. Those two guys in particular, through the work that they do and through, I'll say, all of the little side projects and committees and conferences and things that they're a part of, they continue to find ways to like thoroughly invest in community at scale whenever possible. And so those would definitely be two that I would encourage you to have conversations with.